Welcome into the College Football Overtime Podcast. My name is Garrett Chapman, and we are on episode 51 of this sucker. We are about halfway through the offseason, which honestly, it could not end soon enough because I'm ready for some college football action. I saw the Lindy's magazines popped up, and I about started tearing up. I have a tear in my eye even thinking about it because college football Saturdays are going to be here before you know it. So make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you follow along with Abe Gordon and myself all off season long as we got to keep you entertained and informed on everything that's happening in the college football world. And we got a lot to get into this afternoon, evening, morning, whenever you were watching this podcast. I got to stop doing that because everyone's watching it at different times. We have a college football Hall of Fame ballot that was just released, and I have a couple of names here that I think are pretty good candidates, like, you know, some old guy named Nick Saban, and then some other folks who I think are very interesting too. But we also have a couple of kickoff times that were just formally announced by ESPN. And Abe Gordon, I got to get your thoughts on that. But before we do any of that, I always do every single week, got to welcome in my co-host, Abe Gordon. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. The countdown to the college football kickoff has gone from like wide receiver and tight end numbers. Now we're into like offensive and defensive lineman range. Soon it's going to be linebackers and then running backs and then quarterbacks. And so we're working our way there, brother. We're working our way there.
You know what we need to do starting next pod? We just got to go back and look up for the first kickoff for whatever the first game is. Let's just say it's Georgia Tech and Florida State. That's a strong week 0 matchup. Let's just say we are this football player away from college football action. Maybe we'll do that starting next week. We'll see. Maybe I'll remember and maybe I won't, but we will see.
Too much math for me, man.
That's a lot of math. I don't know, but we will see. But before we do any of that, of course, we got to talk a little bit about this College Football Hall of Fame ballot that was officially released. Of course, none of these guys are going to be announced until January of 2025. So a lot of this is just a little bit of hot air coming from my end, but I have some great candidates here. And of course, being in the city of the College Football Hall of Fame, the beautiful city of Atlanta, we got to talk about it a little bit. And headlining the list is somebody who should really surprise nobody. It's because one of the qualifiers is you have to be over the age of 70 in order to be considered. And, well, Nick Saban hits that qualification. And so he just retired, obviously, 5 months ago. But, you know, he has something called 7 national titles and hundreds of wins as a college football head coach. He's widely regarded as the greatest college football coach of all time. I think he's pretty much a shoo-in, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's not if he gets voted in, it's how quickly they deliberate. And I imagine it's pretty much Nick Saban. Yeah, okay, he's in. We don't have to finish reading off his name. They certainly don't bother with accomplishments for him. I think we all know what the moral of the story is there.
Yeah, I don't think it's too complicated.
Should have his own damn wing.
Yeah, no, literally, he might actually have his own thing. Well, you might actually be able to say, hey, this is the Nick Saban wing. And here's just a picture of his face, and along the walls are all of the All-Americans that he's coached, and then each little pop-up spot every time you walk up somewhere, there's like a little capsule that pops up, and in there is just another one of his national championship trophies that he won while he was head coach at Alabama or at the one at LSU. You know, I mean, like, he is the greatest college football coach to grace this sport, and as somebody who rooted for a team that played against him pretty consistently, he wasn't my favorite person in the world, but I respected the hell out of him. Even when I was a kid growing up, he was the source of a lot of pain for football fans like me. But you know what? He is a fantastic coach, and the personification, what it means to be a great coach and a great man and everything else for the sport. He's been an ambassador for this league and everything else. So he is an absolute shoe-in. I mean, there's not even anything else to say. It's kind of like when Tom Brady comes into to Canton. It just whatever. There's going to be one person who makes that joke and says, like, all right, maybe we don't vote for him, but it's a unanimous selection. But another person on this list who I think is a very good candidate for it is Urban Meyer. And of course, he has the 3 national titles. He coached very successfully at Utah and then moves to Florida, wins the 2 national titles there, has some heart conditions and retires from the game, and then comes right back into it to coach it. A place that he always wanted to coach at Ohio State, the Ohio State University, and he wins a national title there, upsetting Nick Saban. And of course, he had tons of fantastic rivalries and matchups with the greatest coach to ever do it. He beat him a number of times. and including that run to the national title in 2014 as the inaugural college football playoff champion. But Urban Meyer is my second guy on this list.
Yeah, a couple of things. Look, the list of guys that have won national championship at two different schools is not very long. The list of guys that have won a trio, more than two national championships, also not very long. But he hasn't come without some drama. Some of the
Mm-hmm.
situations that took place at Florida while he was there with the Gators can't be ignored, and obviously his health and sometimes how he left the game and returned to it probably shouldn't be ignored either. But at the end of the day, this one, and don't forget, what happened in Jacksonville with the Jaguars does not get taken into account here either, because that would be another little notch that maybe would count against him. At the end of the day, he accomplished simply too much in what is, quite frankly, a short time as a head coach to be in this discussion. But the second school winning a title there, I think probably cements it for him.
Yeah, because I mean, you could say if he had just won the two at Florida, you can just say he was just rode Tim Tebow to the promised land. Which, I mean, of course, Chris Leak won the first one, and Tim Tebow came off the bench and was a beast off of the bench for them in 2006. I want to say it was. But I mean, Urban Meyer's a great coach, and I mean, his track record speaks for itself. He did it everywhere he went. He won constantly, and those two actually have combined for 10 national titles, Abe. 479 wins since 1990. I mean, obviously, Saban's the best coach of all time with 292 games won. But the most impressive is the fact that they've done it in such a short period of time. Because Saban and Meyer, they combined for 8 of those 13 national championships since 2006. It's an unbelievable mark. I mean, these guys have done just the SEC's 13, I should say. But they've just done such a truly an incredible job of dominating the sport. But other notable head coaches who are on this list, Tommy Tuberville, who I'm not exactly thrilled about that one. Ole Miss, Auburn, Texas Tech, Cincinnati. He's been several places, but was fine generally for much of his career. Larry Coker is one who I think is a potential coach, a good option. I mean, he was at Miami and UTSA for several years, won all those national titles with Miami. But moving into the players, who I think it's just as interesting. You have the list goes like way back, Abe, and this is actually going to get into something that I'm going to talk about here in just a second when we finish up here. But this list is massive. Like there are so many people. Like this goes back like 50 years, and I don't understand why that should be the case. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you have guys going from, Josh Heupel's on this list, and I think Josh Heupel's a very interesting candidate. Of course, he was the first team All-American at Oklahoma. He was the Heisman Trophy runner-up, led Oklahoma to a national title, and he left the Sooners. He was the leader in almost every school passing record, even though he played for 2 seasons. I mean, he was a great player, a dominating player, and I don't know why he wouldn't be on this list anyway. I mean, I don't understand the qualifications. It just don't really make sense to me. But Josh Heupel's one that stood out to me immediately.
Yeah, I look, he was a Heisman Trophy runner-up, won a bunch of other awards along with a national championship. Honestly, if you win a Heisman Trophy, you should automatically be a college football Hall of Famer. It should just come along with the territory. And I know we don't have that necessarily, and we will have that discussion in the NFL a couple of years from now with Matt Ryan, right? Won an MVP. Is the Hall of Famer. So an MVP in the NFL isn't quite the same, but a Heisman Trophy should put you in no matter what, hands down, without thought, without question. Now, Heupel didn't quite get one, but he did win a national championship, had some individual success as well. I think the problem that you're going to come into with a lot of these quarterbacks is they probably didn't run as much as guys run now, and their stats are going to be compared to what guys are doing now. And quite frankly, offenses didn't work the same way. There are a lot more run-heavy offenses back then. I know you had a couple of guys like Heupel, like Kingsbury, that ran in some of those air raid offenses that put up some impressive numbers. But it's going to be very tough to look at guys from back in the day and remember what they were competing against quarterbacks of their time versus comparing them to multiple quarterbacks going over 4,000 yards or 50 combined touchdown or whatever the numbers are going to be.
Yeah.
So it is a really tough comparison now. And I think that's why some of the voters are who they are and are historians of the game and can really hark back to who mattered back in the day.
I was because I was actually looking at some of the 1980s SEC football games. Weirdly enough, it's just one of the things that I do. Oftentimes in my spare time, I just sit there and look at scores and do stuff. And I'm looking at a lot of these scores, and they are low scoring games. I think you have a high ranked program going up against a team that's not necessarily as good. And I mean, like the final score is like what 13-7 or something. I mean, it's something that's kind of ridiculous. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's like it's hard to really compare apples to apples what those kind of programs are. And I mean, it's kind of tough when you look at all that stuff and try to compare it like for like. So that's why I also don't really understand why these lists are so long. And when you're trying to compare somebody from 1982 to what they are today, then it's just not really going to be all that fair.
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing as like Josh Heupel. I mean, like he set all of these Oklahoma records, but Sam Bradford blasted those, and then Baker Mayfield blasted those. You have all of these great guys. I mean, I don't think that they necessarily had better seasons than him necessarily, but I mean, maybe Baker Mayfield. I mean, both of those are Heisman Trophy winners, so it's hard to really compare them. But it's easier to compare them, I guess, since they are Heisman Trophy winners. But great seasons are great seasons, and if you have those great seasons, I don't understand what's taken some of these guys so long. One of those in particular is Mark Ingram, the 2009 Heisman Trophy winner and first team All-American.
It's
First
an
ever.
automatic entry if you win a Heisman.
He won a national title. He
Yeah.
was an All-American several times. He was one of the best players at his position for 3 consecutive years. He birthed, really. I mean, he's probably one of the biggest reasons why we have the Alabama dynasty. I mean, like Mark Ingram was the bell cow of that team in 2009, and then again when they won a national title, he won 2 national titles. I mean, he's one of the biggest reasons why we have Nick Saban on this ballot.
Yeah, like I said, automatic birth, man. Like you want a Heisman, you want a national championship. If you can at any point Venn diagram and your name is in both of those boxes, you're in. Like you're good to go. So
yeah, that's one of those things. And again, I'm going to talk about some of these silly qualifications here in just a second. But one other person, it's like, and I want to attack this from a slightly different angle here. So you have somebody who, is a coach who's been a solid coach, and then you have a guy who won a Heisman Trophy and had all the success as a player. Now you have a guy who's had success as an NFLer and as a college athlete, a guy who just retired from the NFL back in March. His name is Aaron Donald. At Pittsburgh, Aaron Donald was a freak, just like he was in the NFL. At 29 and a half career sacks as a defensive tackle, 66 career tackles for loss. I mean, he had one of the best defensive seasons in history. In addition to his 11 sacks, he had 28 and a half tackles for loss and 4 forced fumbles as a defensive tackle. I mean, it's truly, truly one of the most incredible things. And then he goes to the NFL. He's a 3-time NFL Defensive Player of the Year with the Rams. Obviously, that doesn't count for this conversation, but he was a National Defensive Player of the Year. He was a unanimous All-American as a senior. He's one of the best players in college football history, just in terms of being an incredible defensive tackle. But I mean, it's just interesting when you see some of these goated like NFLers who also had these incredible college careers. It's pretty wild to see some of these stats.
yeah, I mean, it's so much tougher for defensive players to win the Heisman. You should take like 5 awards, and if they win 4 of those 5 in a year, like that would serve. I mean, he's got Bednarik, the Nagurski Award, the Outland Trophy, Lombardi Award. I mean, anytime you win a bunch of those in 1 year, and you got to remember when comparing this to NFL, you've only got 3, maybe 4 years max. I know COVID has kind of ramped it up a little bit, but you've only got so many years to impress. So I think having one big monster season is so much more impactful than it is in the NFL. You have to consider guys get in on the heels of one big season, although that's not the case with Aaron Donald. He had multiple double-digit sacks and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, too. It's like oftentimes your best players are leaving after 3 years, at least since 1982 or whatever, since the juniors were allowed to declare for the NFL draft and play professionally. So, yeah, you really only have 3 years. But that kind of gets me into some of these silly qualifications because I'm just going to read this for you. So coaches must have been an active head coach for a minimum of 10 years and have at least a 600 winning percentage. They must wait 3 years after they're done coaching or be at least 70 years old if they're inactive, 75 years old if they are active. I get it to some extent. I don't understand why you have to have a minimum of 10 years or a minimum of a 600 winning percentage necessarily. I don't understand why you have to have that as a qualification, as a benchmark. I understand a benchmark as like a level that you should um, just understandably have, because if you have winning percentages, that sounds great in theory, except for if you're a program who you had to build up off of the ground. Look at the University of Miami. Howard Schellenberger, he's somebody who had to build up. He's somebody who had to just bring everything up, and he turned that program into a national title contender. He really, I mean, he was one of the biggest reasons for that. You look at a Mike Leach, he was a program builder. You look at Irk Russell at Georgia Southern, he was a program builder. He had obviously the 600 winning percentage because he won several national titles and turned Georgia Southern into one of the greatest FCS programs of all time, even though they were birthed in the mid 80s. And he just coached for 8 or 9 years. And then health reasons pulled him out of the game. There is zero reason that Irk Russell should not be in the College Football Hall of Fame. It's ridiculous. And then you go for players, and they have to have been a first team All-American by some entity that is recognized by the NCAA, and the player's college career must be at least 10 years in the past. So that also explains why some of these guys haven't been introduced until just now. But there's no cutoff, I feel like, because the ballot's just massive. But I feel like you need to be able to make some exceptions because you have players like Stetson Bennett who are ineligible to be on this on this ballot. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. He's a 2-time national championship quarterback for a dominating team, and he was the biggest reason to do it. Plus, the story of Stetson Bennett is spectacular. He was a Heisman Trophy finalist, but he's never going to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. It's unbelievable to me, and it doesn't make any sense. It's just silly.
Yeah, I do think you will have exceptions made for players down the road. Stetson Bennett being one of the probably main reasons you do see that subject broached 8 years from now, 9 years from now, when it would have been his turn for eligibility. I don't really have an issue with the player, with the coaches in terms of what they're asked to do. I do think at some point you'll probably have someone that doesn't qualify that people, are reasonable and say this guy needs to be considered. So we need to update our qualifications. I think you'll have that on Stetson Bennett's behalf. I do think you'll have that if someone comes along coaching wise that deems it necessary that they look at it again. I don't know of anyone just off the top of my head that is in that group, but I think if pressed, well, I don't know. I don't think you gave me like some obvious no-brain coaches. I mean,
Irk Russell's a no-brainer.
What?
Irk Russell's a no-brainer.
Huh? What? Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so, man.
How many national titles do you win?
I think you can have a discussion. I don't know if people are no-brainers. Nick Saban and Urban are no-brainers. I mean,
I'm saying if people who should be if Irk Russell coached one or two more years, I think it had 8 or 9 years as a head coach. It's just because he coached as defensive coordinator for so long in Georgia. If he had coached 1 or 2 more years, he'd be an easy selection. It's not even, and it wouldn't even be considered. Like he could have lost every game that he played or he coached those next 2 years, and he would still be a no-brainer. And that's why it's silly.
Yeah,
especially silly with the players.
You got to do it at the highest level. I mean, I guess this is. I mean, do they recognize FCS?
Yeah. They said, Division I.
So maybe you talk about it, but yeah, I certainly don't think he's a no-brainer. But sure.
Okay, all right. Well, in other news, I mean, did you have anything else you want to say?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, we also have some funky kickoff times that were just officially announced, Dave. I'm sure you saw this. The Egg Bowl moving to 3:30 on Black Friday. I don't know about you, but that feels a little dirty. Clean old-fashioned hate moving to prime time on Black Friday, which, again, feels equally dirty. First non-Saturday game in Athens since 1994. First time in this rivalry that it's been moved to a weeknight since 1995. I think it was also moved to a Friday on that one as well. Texas and Oklahoma is also being moved to 3:30 after living at noon for however long, very long time. So you already are starting to see some of the impact of ESPN, ABC, the big network taking over the biggest conference in college football. And uh, people are a little messed up about it. Yeah, I know being here in Georgia and living in Atlanta and covering the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, I've seen a lot of people who are pretty disgruntled just because you've had these tickets and you've had these hotel reservations and everything else for a very long time. So these are things that have kind of been set in stone for I don't know 30 years in some cases, and it's just been the same exact situation. I'm also not really the biggest fan of playing college football on Fridays. I understand that the GHSA, the Georgia High School Sports Association, has already moved given a bye week to the high school sports here in Georgia, but maybe that's not the case in Mississippi. I can't speak to them in that instance, but I don't like college football games moving on Fridays. I don't think they belong on Friday nights. I think Friday nights are reserved for high school football. But what do you think about these game times, Abe?
Yeah, I think it's a situation where they're obviously kicking tradition to the curb and are dealing with getting the most eyes on these games. I think it shouldn't be that surprising or unexpected. It is really what it boils down to. But yeah, the broadcast money is allowing them to take control of certain things they want control of, and kickoff time is one of them. And tradition be damned is really what it boils down to.
That's pretty much it. And you know what? I mean, it's been a brutal sort of situation, but you know what? This is the new era of college football, and that's just kind of what's going
We're not
on.
going to be complaining when we're sitting there on Black Friday
No,
watching
I'll
the
be
game.
fine.
So,
Once we get
you
to
know what I
Friday,
mean?
once we get to Friday, I'll be I fine.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll be I'll be able to cover a game in Athens on Friday night and then come back and enjoy my Saturday, and that's really what I'm looking forward to. Plenty to talk about here on college football overtime on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game game time, I should say. Excuse me. When we do get to that one in the fall, so looking forward to that one as well. But that's it for us here on College Football Overtime, episode 51. Make sure you follow, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, because we are an offensive lineman number away from college football action kicking off officially in August. I cannot wait for it. I know you can't either. So make sure you follow along all offseason long right here on the College Football Overtime podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you again right here again next week. Thanks.